Welcome to another Dietitian Talk, where we get to all talk with our dietitian team here at Married to Health. Today's topic is on nutrition confusion. So we're going to be talking about the confusing world of nutrition, but it shouldn't be, but it is, with all the different TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, and you're probably watching this on a platform where you hear a lot about nutrition and health and what you should be doing, right? And maybe it's confusing. So let's talk about some of these topics. I am James Marin, Integrative Registered Dietitian, co-founder of Married to Health.
I'm Dahlia Marin, registered dietitian, also one of the co-founders of Married to Health. And we're excited to be joined here by two of our dietitians. We're excited to introduce you to our newest dietitian. And Katie, I'll let you introduce yourself. And then Joseph, I'd love for you to introduce yourself as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Dahlia and James. So my name is Katie Chakos. I'm a licensed registered dietitian, and I am based out of Chicago. And this is a second career for me. So I didn't originally go into dietetics, and it was something that kind of really always fascinated me. And I decided, after spending some time in the corporate world, that I really wanted to help individuals within their health journey. So I went back to school, got credentialed, and now I'm here, and I'm excited to be a part of the team.
Yeah, wonderful.
We're excited to have you too. So I'm excited because I know I have diarrhea of the mouth all the time, you guys, if you haven't noticed.
Well, hold on, let Joseph introduce himself and then.
But Katie and I were, getting to talk a little bit ahead of time. And James stopped me because he was like, save it for the live. But I love, the insight that Katie brings as well from having just that other insight into marketing. I think it gives you a really unique perspective as a dietitian. So can't wait to have you join our first live together. And then we have Joseph. So Joseph, love for you to introduce yourself as well.
Yes, my name is Joseph, also from California, registered dietitian, and I specialize in eating disorders and gut health.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Awesome.
Love it. And we love that we all get to kind of overlap because, me being a dietitian who specializes in irritable bowel syndrome, small intestinal bacterial and methanogenic overgrowth, fungal overgrowth, I often find myself referring patients to our other dietitians, whether that's Joseph, because the patient is also struggling at the same time with eating disorder as they are struggling with SIBO IBS, or with Vicky because they're also wanting to tap into weight loss. And Vicky couldn't be here to join us today. Vicky's our other amazing dietitian who specializes in cardiometabolic disease. So it's great that we get to have this collaborative team effort. And so we all will bring in kind of our own unique flavors and our own unique perspectives from our own niche and our experience. So we might talk today about personal patients. I know I have something I want to talk about that happened just yesterday, but also just things that we hear out there in the sphere, in the internet.
And if you guys are confused, if you have nutrition confusion, you heard about a diet, or you heard about this cleanse, or you heard about this test, or anything, post right now, chat at the bottom, click, comment, any questions you have, we'll answer them live. We're here with you live. So if you're watching this on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, post your comment live in the chat. We'll answer it live. Otherwise, we have plenty to talk about. There's no shortage of things to talk about here in this space. Oh, we already have. So excited to see what you will bring to future YouTube and Instagram lives, Katie. Cool. Nice comment for Katie already. So wonderful. Thank you so much. So like I said, comment live. We'll talk about it. But Dahlia, what did you want to start, or anything burning on anyone's mind? Yes. Nutrition confusion.
I want to bring up Katie's proposed topic first because I think it's a good one. So Katie wanted to talk about having to go all or nothing with nutrition and making really drastic changes overnight. So Katie, I'd love for you to give us more of your insight and what you've seen in this and where you hope to see it go with some of the confusion that happens with feeling like people have to go cold turkey.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I've noticed with patients is this feeling that I need to make such drastic changes to my diet tomorrow. And they're left feeling even more confused, not knowing how to implement all of these changes all at once. And then eventually that's not sustainable for them. And they kind of backtrack and maybe become worse or have even worse dietary habits than they did before, see their issues exacerbate even more. And the biggest thing that I try to remind patients of is starting small and creating those realistic goals. And maybe it's adding one new vegetable to your plate every day, or maybe it's even every week. It might not even be every day, and something that you don't have to go into certain camps of I follow this diet or I follow that diet, or I'm making this big declaration that I'm no longer going to do XYZ, or I am going to do XYZ. You can kind of you want to set yourself up for success, and doing that is through small incremental changes.
Totally. Yeah, totally agree. And this notion, it's funny. It's like people would rather do these massive, and I think it has a lot of psychological aspects to it, right? You'd rather like, man, I don't want to be here anymore, so I'm going to do the complete opposite of what I've been doing. It needs to be this monumental, massive shift, and I need to throw out everything in my kitchen and just go completely cold turkey on whatever it is, right? A, B, C, D, F, G. There's so many options out there, right? And I think it's important to realize, like, wow, you could also do little steps, like that also works too, and that could be very useful. So it doesn't have to be this all or nothing. I think that's great. We do have, it's funny, I'm seeing the comments coming in. Or go ahead.
Yeah. And, I think Laura's really speaking to the fact that people want instant gratification on, the splendor of their efforts to say, okay, if I just do this, and I think anytime you use that word just, most of the time it's not going to lead you somewhere great. Life is seldom that simple where you can kind of simplify it down to, if I just completely change all my nutrition habits and I jump in wholeheartedly to this huge change, then everything's going to be great. So, yeah. And I'm sure, Joseph, you see this in your population with eating disorders. So tell us what you see with that. And if you see that with disordered eating, of people wanting to just say, okay, I'm going to make a complete 180.
Yeah, definitely. And I love how James said it was psychological, because I see this not only with eating disorders, but with life, like in my family, with my friends, like, this idea of going all or nothing, and like doing this one huge change that's going to make everything different. And it kind of makes me think of like how yo-yo dieting happens. And a lot of times when people go on diets, they make a lot of huge changes. It lasts for a month, maybe a few months, even a year. And then after they're unable to follow the diet anymore, they rebound. And, there's a lot of evidence out there showing that after that, you either gain back all the weight that you had before the diet, or 10 or 20 pounds more. So I see that as kind of the all or nothing, like going from one extreme to another, because you're literally not, most of the times, you're not going back to even where you started, right? You're shooting to one extreme of the diet, and then you're coming back all the way, right, to the other end of the spectrum to where you were, and sometimes even past that. So I think what Katie was explaining, right, like that it's just not not sustainable, right? And making these small little sustainable changes is it's just what works, right?
Yeah.
Like we're creatures of habit. We, like, our bodies don't want us to make these giant changes. They react to that, right?
Yeah. Well, and then I think it's counterproductive, because the more of these diets people change, one, it's affecting their relationship with food, because you're told in these 10 different diets that one food is, bad, and then it's a superfood, and then it's a really good food, and it's a green light food. But nope, this one says it's a yellow light food, and that one says it's a red light. So yeah, absolutely. It's affecting your relationship with food. And then over time becoming disheartening. I don't know how many times you all have heard, but I know I've heard from my patients, well, I've tried so many diets and I'm over it now. So I think, again, people fall into this, I have to just completely overhaul everything, and they're relapsing and then getting back on another diet bandwagon, relapsing a new diet bandwagon. And then they get this idea that changing their lifestyle habits for better or for worse is just not the way to go. So it can also hinder potentially really helpful medical nutrition therapy that we as dietitians might be suggesting because they feel just burnt from their past experiences with it. And I think it's tricky for me. I'm speaking from, again, that lens of IBS and SIBO, because sometimes these medical nutrition therapies are indicated. So it makes sense for me to be suggesting low FODMAP or low histamine or low sulfur, or, some type of change for a patient for the better for their gut microbiome. But I'm also weighing at the same time, how is this going to hinder their relationship with food? Is this going to help because they're tolerating food a little bit better? Really coaching them on, sure, we are almost kind of changing things more so overnight, yes and no, but it's temporary. And little by little, we're going to get more food than you started with back into your diet. So I see both ends of that coin, where making those overnight changes can be helpful in some cases to open up new doors for new foods. But for the most part, especially without proper guidance, more harm than good, I think, is caused.
Yeah, we've seen some of that with even the data supporting that. When we look at some research studies that look at yo-yo dieting, or again, more generally speaking, as we approach summertime here in Southern California, where it's like, oh my gosh, it's June 1st. I got to get ready in the next 4 weeks for the beach, or in the next couple of days for the beach. And you go on these highly restrictive short-term diets that really aren't sustainable, nor are they healthy. We've seen for the gut microbiome, for that gut-brain connection, when you look at maybe those with history of eating disorders, or you're looking at nurturing the gut and you're going, wow, is what I'm doing actually doing that long term? Or am I just trying to lose 10 or 20 pounds of water weight short term, right? And you look at the sustainability of that, and there's data to back that up and go, no, it's not only is it not sustainable, it's detrimental to your health on multiple levels, especially when we're thinking about long-term body composition, not just weight loss, which I wish Vicky was here. She can get into that more. But yeah, it's so important. And a comment that came in, I think the appeal of making big changes is the instant motivation that comes with it. Completely agree that it's definitely not sustainable. Yeah. And I get excited about things. Dahlia is always telling me this, of like, you get so excited about things, and it's exciting, like, ooh, a big change, or again, going more in the health field of like, ooh, I'm going to get that 6-pack, or I want to do this. Or some out there, maybe like they want to do a fitness competition. It's really exciting. So they just go full force into it. And that's great, but also use some of that energy to think long term, use some of that energy to do research. Or if you're not like, hey, I don't want to become a health professional, hey, reach out to a really great health professional that can help you, right? Get that team and that community and that tribe around you for sustainable success, and use some of that energy for the long term. I think is very important. But yeah.
And have that sustainable plan to live through it. I kind of think of our daughter of, sometimes we won't tell her when we have plans or exciting things coming up, because she hypes herself up so much and won't sleep for days leading up to it, and is so excited leading up that when we get there, she's so exhausted and crabby, and then it ruins the experience. So she ends up being like, so I hate Disneyland. And it's like, no, dude, it was your experience with it. So yeah, I think it is. It's really coaching people of, how can we pace ourselves to make this something that is sustainable? It should be sensible. It shouldn't be something that's extreme. I think, it's something that's important to consider.
Yeah, that's great. What were you going to say, Joseph?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that, like when you're talking about, the short-term weight loss, right? Like, there are people, right, that, like, I don't know, like, have a competition or doing sporting events and stuff, right? That, like, they do this because it works, right? Like, the short-term diet, like, worked because they got ready for that event. So I think it's important just, like, knowing your goal, because that's what I kind of tell my patients, like, hey, this is my goal always. Like, I'm thinking about long-term sustainable health. Is that what you're looking for, right? Because I think that's important to know. Like, if they come in and they're just like, no, I just want to lose weight, like, for my wedding, and then after, like, I don't care how, right? You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, I think that's important to just know, like, that, like, where they're coming in at, And
Mm.
if they don't want to do long term, it's like, okay, like that's cool. There's plenty of help you could get, right? But this is my focus. This is our focus, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
And I think the
Yeah.
other thing too is, oh, sorry, James.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say the other thing too, going off of what Joseph said, is like monitoring goals. And a lot of times as dietitians, we talk about creating lifestyle changes. These are all lifestyle changes, but your current lifestyle took a long time for you to get there. And so these new lifestyle changes also equally need to take some time to get used to and build strong habits that then cumulatively will create that lifestyle change.
Totally.
Yes.
And that's funny. A comment: a diet is not something you're on, it's the way you eat, which is very, very true. Speaking from, we always pose this, we've said this before in other podcasts and when educating patients, but this idea too of kind of doing so many things so quickly. What is that doing to your gut microbiota, right? The population in your gut. What is that doing to your gut microbiome, which is that the genetics and the outcomes of all that. And no other time, we live in a very special time, I think we can all agree, where you can literally eat a ton of plants and then in a week or even in a couple of days eat no plants and then go on an all fat diet and then go, you're right, we call it keto or low carb or vegan or whole food plant based, and you can switch so rapidly. And to do that before, for the majority of human existence, to do that, you'd have to travel great distances overall, right? To go from eating like an Alaskan native, then going down to like South America and eat all the fruit you want. Like the tropical fruit didn't grow in Alaska. You'd have to make that journey down to where it does grow and then eat those. But today, you go to one store and you can find it all, right? So it's really interesting to take this context and give our patients that context and go, let's kind of slow down a bit. Let's really get into what you want and what are the tools for that, and then give that important context and cut through that confusion, right? Because then when it doesn't work out, they're like, what the heck? Like, what do you mean? I did keto for 2 weeks and then now I heard plant-based is better, so I'm doing that for 2 weeks. Why am I not feeling better with whatever's going on, right? So important.
And I think this is something that Katie had mentioned before, was I think people are almost now entering into nutrition burnout and lifestyle change burnout. I was saying I've kind of noticed this shift where I think nutrition content and conversations around nutrition and lifestyle are getting less engagement, attention, and thankfully, I think for the better, more of the conversation is shifting towards mental health. So I think finally mental health is having its heyday, where a lot of these mental health pages and those speaking on mental health are really getting the attention mental health has always deserved. But I agree. I think in the last couple of years, because people were home a lot and because they weren't as distracted with other parts of their lives, they really did focus heavily on nutrition and lifestyle in the last couple of years, for better or for worse. But we did see that focus happening. But yeah, I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on that. Like, do you feel like people are in nutrition burnout or lifestyle burnout at this point because of all this constant restriction, relapse, reattempt after that? What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the majority of patients I see, it's a lot of times pulling back from what they're doing because they're doing so much, like you said, like either burning themselves out or like I'm taking this part of this diet and then this part of this and like all these different like nutrition tips I got online, and I'm just kind of like creating my own like my own like boiling pot of like what works for me, but then everything's like contraindicating each other. So yeah, most of the time it's just like, hey, okay, like we're gonna stop thinking about all these rules that you've created, right, that you've learned from like posts or that you saw on Google, and we're going to try this one thing for a few weeks, and then we're going to see how you feel after that. And then most of the time, just that, even just the stress it removes from the person, they start to feel better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And to pop this up again, comment a lot of searching for instant gratification for sure. Which yeah.
And sometimes, yeah, that's a conversation I'll have with my patients, because I've had patients say, but I follow this person and they're saying this, or there was a talk at my church and the person speaking was saying this, or, my mom's doing this. And sometimes it's taking a step back and asking, who is that person's target audience? And are you that person's target audience? Because if you're following a cardiologist who is dealing with people in heart failure and they're recommending a very low fat diet, and that's not what you're dealing with, you're not their target audience. So you shouldn't really follow their word as it's gospel, as if it's gospel. So it's also asking that, are you that person's target audience before you're really buying into all of their recommendations? Do you need to unfollow some accounts? Do you really need to pare down what you're seeing, what you're being exposed to on a really regular basis?
Yeah,
Okay.
very important. I mean,
Oh,
go ahead.
and are you following a cardiologist, like a person who specializes in diabetes, like 10 different right, specific areas, and then taking like little pieces of advice from each of them?
Right.
Because those might not always be cohesive with one another. And I think that brings up kind of one of the things we wanted to talk about next is like, who is really a nutrition professional? I know we've done a live on this before and we've spoken. So if you do want to go back and watch that, it's on our YouTube. But who really is a nutrition professional who truly is qualified to speak on nutrition? Because yes, I think a lot of doctors are becoming certified in lifestyle medicine and are learning more about nutrition. Maybe they're doing nutrition fellowships, but I think that's certainly the exception, not the rule. So I want to hear your guys' opinions on some of this of, who's out there giving some of this information, who you feel is qualified to give some of this information, whether that's influencers, these doctor dietitians, these, people on social media who mean well. But yeah, I want to hear what you guys think about that.
I think for me, especially being a second career dietitian, it's something that I think about often because I technically didn't really have to go back to school and get my dietitian credential. I could have just gone online and started sharing nutrition information. But the fact of having to go back to school and take all of these heavy science courses, going through, for me, I went through a master's program to then get credentialed. There's a lot of understanding that we have to have about the human body, about anatomy, about disease processes, that your average influencer, although they may have a place in this field in terms of giving maybe some recipe inspiration and things like that, there's always a space for that. But when it comes to giving individualized care, medical nutrition therapy, I think it's really important to go and seek out those professionals, those dietitians, that you can work with to get that care that you need specific for you.
Love it. And we have some comments coming in. There's too much information out there, information overload, demonizing certain foods, and hearing others talk wonders about the same foods. So confusing. Another one that goes in line with what you're saying, Katie. Exactly. Making sure you're getting information from credentialed healthcare professionals. So it is true. And look, and I love some of the other things out there, right? I love like the sound baths and the nature baths and the grounding and all that. I think it's really cool. We keep an open mind, but it's having the humility, right? To, if you are a health coach or if you're an alternative healthcare provider or if you've gotten a certification, if you are in a little bit over your head, it's really being a team, right? It's going to a registered dietitian or to a gastroenterologist or endocrinologist and going, hey, I have someone I'm coaching or working with or whatever the case is. And or going to the patient and telling them, hey, you need to add more to your team, because rarely do I find a patient who's in really deep trouble, whether that's like Crohn's disease or any type of severe disease they're in, and they just have one health coach on their team, or even the case of like one endocrinologist on their team. They're usually seeing, again, we say team, emphasis team, they're seeing multiple providers, and they could be chiropractors and sound bath healers and endocrinologists and gastroenterologist or whatever the case is. It's really being that team. And I love kind of mixing that, the Eastern medicine with the Western medicine, and finding that commonality, finding that common ground, and finding the best healing team for you. And it goes back full circle. Like, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? You don't have to be healed with sound and thoughts and then not take medication, or vice versa, right? So it can be a combination of things that make you feel well spiritually, mentally, physically, and that works for you and is tailored for you. So yeah, I think that's so important. Yeah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I think it's when you're thinking about like what you need help with, what is the right tool for the job, right? Like, okay, I got a hammer and a nail. What should I get? Should I get the screwdriver? Should I get the wrench or the hammer, right? So if
Yeah.
you're going to a doctor that have very extensive learning and education on medication, right? Going to them for diet advice might not be the best idea, right? Same thing is like if you got hit by a car and like your arm's broken, and then you go to a dietitian and you're like, hey, what foods can I eat to fix my arm? Right? I would probably say, hey, how about we go to a doctor as soon as possible, and like, let's stop this appointment now and call a doctor. Right? So basically, like you mentioned, the team, right? Like, if you want to work on what you're eating, and especially like, this is why I love, like, all of us work with focus on gut health, and like, making the gut healthy, because what's like one of the most important things for gut health, right? Like, what you're taking in, what you're consuming every day. So yeah, like, if you're struggling with digestive issues or anything, like, who is most likely to help you, right? Like, who has the tools, who has the knowledge to do that?
Yeah, because you're not just gonna like, oh yeah, I'm bleeding, I have blood in my stool, but my blood sugar's so high, and I'm just gonna focus on that. It's like, well, no, the blood in your stool is very important also, right? It's trying to take care of things at the root, and again, that speaks to, like you're saying, gut centered, and just being integrated, right? Connecting. There's a lot of people out there, maybe many of you watching, who think these things are separate, right? That it's not a coincidence that you've been constipated for 10 years, and maybe you also have diabetes. Those things are not separate issues, or the opposite. You have constant diarrhea and you have diabetes, right? Your gut is being affected by both of those, and it is finding the root of that, which came first, and where do we start with that? So yeah, really cool.
And, of course we're biased because we are dietitians, but I think, one, we are trained to be experts on nutrition. And I think an interesting and unique area that we have education and insight on is also disordered eating. So I know, Joseph, that's your specialty, but I'm going to speak on my experience really briefly of, I've had so many patients whose doctor just said, you need to lose weight, you need to lose weight, you need to lose weight, but didn't address that patient has binge eating disorder or shows signs of disordered eating and binging. Or when, I've worked with a naturopath in the past, recognizing, hey, have you noticed that patient we both see who's in this group class that we do, who never actually eats the foods that we're sampling and keeps atrophying and losing weight? Have you ever thought that maybe she has an eating disorder? And it was just kind of like, no, I didn't even notice that. So I think we also are a valuable part of the team in that way, where we can kind of help patients recognize when it is maybe a disordered eating pattern, when other healthcare practitioners aren't necessarily trained on that outside of, those trained in mental health. But I think that gives us an interesting insight into that. So kind of tying it all back into, who are you following? What type of advice are you seeking to get from that person? And do you need to bring somebody else onto the team? Those are always important questions to be asking. I feel like we're coming to a point at this time where I think influencers are being called out a little bit more and recognized when they are kind of out of their lane a little bit, and saying like, everyone eat this. It's the best food for everyone. And, I think we're finally kind of becoming hip to that. But yeah, I think it's interesting to kind of recognize the information that's put out there on social media, who is putting it out, what their intentions are with putting it out, and where patients can go to get a little bit more credible information. I can't tell you how many patients I've seen who said, I've had these symptoms of IBS for 10 years or so, and I've tried several different online programs. I actually had just a patient yesterday tell me she came to me after trying 3 separate programs that she found through Instagram, and they were with various types of healthcare practitioners. One of them was with like an acupuncturist. One of them was with another influencer who had a heal your gut type of program. And then she came to me to try to get some solid answers on SIBO IBS. But yeah, I think that those things are out there. So having informed consumers to kind of know who's a good trusted source and is this person the right fit for me is going to be something that's really important. Because as consumers, we have a responsibility as well. Of course, as those putting out the content, you have a responsibility. But I think as consumers as well, it's kind of knowing if that's the right information for you, if not, how it makes you feel, how it sits with you, if you're more confused by it than anything.
Comment coming in. I think it's very important to take what those who are not certified say with a grain of salt. Yeah. Good advice. Yeah, and that's not to say don't listen. I mean, I love listening to different perspectives and everybody, regardless of their background, but you want to, or always context matters, right? You got to have that context. So that's great. Listen to people. Everyone has a voice and we have free speech and we want to communicate, but understand the context. Someone who's been in the field for decades versus someone who's in this healthcare field for 1 year, they're obviously going to have different perspectives and different experience levels. So definitely take that context into consideration. Another thing, yeah, maybe one of the last topics, or if anyone else, anyone has anything else to add, but we have some other questions coming in. But addressing, tests, not people, is so important. We've been seeing lots of confusion with, I mean, there's so many tests now out there in terms of lab testing, Dutch test, and different types of stool testing, and environmental tox screens, and
saliva, urine, blood, hair.
There's so many, and we've had patients in the practice who do the testing, but don't have symptoms. But they're like, but my testing's off. But like, what are you feeling? Why? I don't know. I feel fine, or I feel overall okay. But my tests, and it's like, well, we're here to treat you, not your tests. So having that context is so important.
What do you guys have? You guys had that experience, or what's your opinion on all these tests that people can order by themselves, or they're signing up for these programs that say just submit a stool test and that's what your program's based off of?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is the ones that can be ordered online. There's certain food sensitivity tests that aren't validated and aren't necessarily showing what a consumer thinks or what it's being marketed towards. And then us as dietitians have to go in and educate somebody. And it's always, it makes me as a practitioner feel bad because this person spent all this money to get all these tests and then make all these drastic changes because of what it says. And then maybe it leads to more disordered eating habits that you have to now dive into and really evaluate, or it can lead to any other health conditions and concerns. So it's always a question is that test really a valid test to take? Is it worth your time to do it? I would say if you can probably order it as a consumer, I would maybe question that a little bit versus if your healthcare practitioner recommends something, that's much more different.
Yeah, agree. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just like it's like a little piece of the puzzle, right? Like there's so many different puzzle pieces. Yeah, I was listening to this podcast and someone on there said, a good physician treats the disease. A great physician treats the person with the disease, right? So not every person with diabetes is going to be the same. Not every person with heart disease is going to be the same. So I think it's kind of like that attitude sometimes when looking at the test. Like, oh, you're 1 point over this range. So that means it's out of the range. And now we have to do this protocol, right? Where it's like, okay, like this instead, but like going past that, it's like, oh, this person also told me like they've been sleeping like an hour a night for the past month. Like maybe that has something to do with it, you know?
No.
Yeah, so it's a piece of the puzzle, right? And yeah, I think it is important to look at that kind of like um, you know, there are tests that have been used for a very long time and that do give you good information. Um, but there's also tests that are coming out like, every day there's new tests coming out, and like the newer they are, like the less evidence there is behind them, right? So just, you know, most of the time, just if you're getting a test, what is it going to change? Like, like, okay, like say you have to spend money for it or anything, right? Like, what are you hoping? Like, this test tells you you have something, and maybe that's even good information, but then does that even change the course of treatment? Because that's
Exactly.
that's something I noticed a lot too, is like even myself, like I did like a lot of the stool tests and like different tests, and like I saw the results and I was like, whoa, this is so cool. Like, okay, like this is off and this is, and then it's like, okay, what do I do? And then it was like, oh, I'm doing the same thing that I was doing before. So yeah, it's like it's a piece of the puzzle, right? There is good tests, but there's also new tests that aren't validated. It's just, I think that's, when picking like a practitioner that you want to see, right? A good practitioner will, go through all of these things, will like use integrative treatment, right? Look at the tests, look at how you're sleeping, look at how you're eating, look at all these things, right? And understand that, yeah, that's part of it, but what else is going on?
Yeah, big red flag is just an abundance of testing, and
Yeah.
hey, why are we ordering those tests? Oh well, it's all gonna help. Really?
It'll get
How?
to your root cause.
Yeah. Okay. So asking those questions, and we're all about great testing and even innovative new testing. But yeah, exactly. What does that change in the outcome of the action plan? How does that change the action plan? What new information is that going to give us to change something that's going to really impact your health? Important questions to answer.
Yeah. And I've had this experience with, I sometimes will see dietitians as my patients. So I see it happening even amongst healthcare. I know, Joseph, you said you've even ordered, because we can order ourselves these tests sometimes. So
Mhm.
I've had patients not only who are healthcare practitioners, but other patients who say, my practitioner was willing to order me this test, but they told me they didn't know how to interpret it. So they ordered me a really convoluted Dutch urine hormone test, but they didn't know how to interpret the test. Or, I have seen several dietitians as my patients who will say, I ordered myself these tests. I don't know what they mean. I got too overwhelmed trying to look up what each strain of bacteria or each thing was trying to tell me. So, if your practitioner is trying to sell you a test, it's asking them what they hope to learn from the test and how that will change their recommendations based on the test. Because I have also had other patients who will tell me things like, I was fine. My daughter did a stool test and found she had a candida overgrowth. So I did a stool test and nothing really showed up. I had a little bit of candida. I did this whole protocol, and now I've had SIBO for 2 years. I had another patient who did something similar. He actually went to a healthcare practitioner, like a medical doctor. He wanted to do a stool test, even though he didn't really have symptoms. He had parasites show up on his test. Same story. For 2 years straight, he has had horrible symptoms because he went into a really heavy parasite cleanse, a candida cleanse. So I've had several patients tell me these things. So again, if you're not symptomatic of these things, you want to take them with a grain of salt of what are you going to do about it? If you're doing a stool test and it shows H. pylori, it's also working with a practitioner who can tell you, one, that's not an appropriate way to really diagnose H. pylori. You shouldn't be diagnosing H. pylori on a stool test. A practitioner who's versed in it should recommend a breath test for it. And two, H. pylori is a commensal type of microbe. If you're not symptomatic with symptoms of H. pylori, let it be. It doesn't always need immediate intervention, aggressive intervention, and obsession over what the tests say.
Wonderful, guys. I think we can continue on this topic forever,
Yes.
but this is great. We'll definitely be back with another dietitian talk. We do these once a month. Stay tuned. Next week, I think we're going to doing our Good Gut Live. We have some more content coming. Check out our Instagram, comment below. There's links below for if you want to work with Katie or Joseph or Vicky or any of our dietitians. Comment below, link below, website below, everything is below.
Ask us any of your other questions. I wrote some other ones down we didn't get a chance to talk to, like addressing the fact that superfoods are marketed as magic food. So we'll always want to infuse some of these things into our future talks. So if you guys have questions that we haven't answered, or you're watching this later and you want us to answer questions later in our next dietitian talk, please ask them below and we'll make sure to get to them.
All right. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you for watching and participating. We love your comments and questions as always.
Yes.
And we'll see you next time.
And Katie and Joseph, thank you so much for your expertise and your perspectives on these topics.
All right.
You're welcome.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Have a great
Bye.
weekend.